Hello and welcome to the pharmaphorum podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Comstock. I'm joined today by Lyndi Hirsch, SVP of Marketing Strategy at Medisafe, and Eugene Borukhovich, co-founder and COO of YourCoach Health. YourCoach and Medisafe are both digital health companies, but very different, but they did enter into a partnership together at the beginning of June. And I thought it would be fun to get Lyndi and Eugene together to talk a little bit about what's special about that partnership. And more broadly, if folks aren't familiar with Medisafe or aren't familiar with YourCoach, to talk a little bit about the work they do. I think there's a lot of interesting insights to be gained from this conversation about the care ecosystem and how digital is enabling it in different ways. So welcome to the show, Lyndi and Eugene.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Jonah.
So maybe just to start off, if you guys want to just give kind of maybe one at a time, talk a little bit about your own companies and what they do, the elevator pitch, as it were. And then whoever wants to jump in and sort of briefly explain the partnership news.
Lyndi, why don't you kick us off with Medisafe, and then I'll chime in.
Sure, absolutely. So at Medisafe, it is our mission to support better overall health management by seamlessly connecting patients, their caregivers, their whole support system, and their healthcare team together. And when we look at our customer base, we look at integrating pharma manufacturers into that ecosystem to be able to provide better connected, better integrated programs and support for that entire ecosystem. Our connected health platform was designed to enable our customers, so the pharma manufacturers, patients, healthcare professionals, with the tools and resources to fill the gaps where there have previously and traditionally been isolated solutions that don't connect all of those constituents and support system together. This platform allows for those resources to support patients' needs on a daily basis, provide timely, real-time information for support and intervention for manufacturers and healthcare professionals, and reporting back to healthcare professionals to see the experience of their patients over time.
Medisafe is an interesting one. I've been aware of and covering the company for many years now because I was at Moby Health News previously. And it's been interesting to see you guys evolve from sort of a medication adherence tool to so much more than that.
Yes, Jonah, thank you for saying that. And it's good to be speaking with you since you do have so much history and knowledge and understanding what we're about. You know, I often think about when I'm talking to customers or involved in conversations with our programming, how previously were pigeonholed a bit as an adherence app. When the evolution of this organization moved from providing a resource of app for communication and support into this well-integrated connected healthcare platform that allows to be integrated with systems like Salesforce or proprietary systems within pharma to connect all of the tools and resources. And the idea and the origin of Medisafe is brilliant at its birth, right? Our founder's father had a healthcare emergency. He has diabetes. He took his medication twice. He ended up in the hospital room, in the emergency room, And he almost died. And at that time, our founders, his sons, were questioning how come there wasn't some type of support tool to understand what medications, when he took them, how often he took them. And that was the birth of the idea of this Medisafe adherence app. Over the years, though, of really looking at and anticipating what was needed in the industry, understanding the behaviors of patients, and listening to what patients needed, this platform, the Connected Health Platform, was developed to ensure that the tool is not another yet isolated tool in a healthcare environment of many pieces and parts. The Connected Health Platform was developed to help patients manage holistically their overall care, or a caregiver or family member holistically manage care for the other family member. And so patients can, in one place, manage all of their healthcare needs. They don't need to be going to separate apps or systems to manage all of that.
So, Eugene, your turn. Talk to us a little bit about YourCoach.
I'll chime in just because it's very appropriately how Medisafe got started. I think many entrepreneurs in the healthcare space, there's a reason why these companies get started. So I'll back up. YourCoach was started by my real boss, or my boss in real life, as well as my boss at work. So Marina. She went through breast cancer, and in her own words, doctor saved her life. But as she discovered health coaching, it allowed her to live the life that she's now living in her own terms. She became a health coach herself, and she built a practice management solution. That's kind of the evolution of us as a company for, honestly, herself to manage her business. And then the light bulb very quickly went off to say, we can actually empower thousands and thousands and thousands of coaches to help other individuals. So what we do as your coach, we ultimately provide tech-enabled coaching services to the health and care industry. And we power up other companies, other brands with the elastic supply of coaches, but not just the supply of coaches, but the quality management, the technology and the integration components of all of this. And this is where a little bit of the magic around what Medisafe brings to the table, which is a really high tech. Enabling the patient engagement, and Lyndi, you'll correct me if I'm given the one-liner correctly. But then bringing together, while we believe in very high tech and enabling coaches with technology, but a very high touch approach to actually enhance people's health and well-being.
So you both.
Jonah, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I would just love to make one comment about what Eugene just said. So let me go back to that. I would like to make a comment around this high tech and high touch idea. I have spent the majority of my career on the pharma side, building brands, launching brands. And over these past few decades, the conversation has always been high tech versus high touch. What does it mean, and how much of it do you need to balance, and what are the right systems to have in place, and when? And that is not our current state, nor is it our future. High tech and high touch are our future. And the high tech allows us to have high touch at the right time, with the right people, with the right integrations. That allows us to make the right investments, have the right communications, personalize, and really impact the experience of the people we're giving care to. That's the difference today of having both.
That is really interesting because you're right. You always hear high tech versus high touch. And what you're saying is it's high touch via high tech, right? High tech enabling high touch.
Absolutely. Incredibly high touch because you're enabled by high tech.
So let's talk a little bit about the particular.
John, I'll let. Yeah, go ahead. Because I think both Lyndi and I can continue talking about each of those and the combination. So please go ahead.
Well, I mean, maybe feel free to weave that in. I was just going to ask about the particulars of the partnership. What is the kind of practical impact from the perspective of your users, your patients and healthcare partners?
Lyndi, maybe I'll start with a little bit of the history and then kind of we'll tackle this together in the partnership, right? So I'll back up. It was actually interesting. Back to kind of Marina. Her mom passed away, but prior to that, we actually signed up for Medisafe. So she was using Medisafe, right? And actually, rewinding back, it was a absolutely great tool. And I know, Lyndi, there's the medication adherence, but there's the broader kind of patient engagement component. But certainly, and I've, for full transparency to the listeners, I've known Omri and Rotem and the team for many, many, many years, being in digital health as well, and loved what they're doing. And this concept of, again, we so over-indexed in digital health on the word digital, not the health part, right? That everything that, the technology can solve it all. And yes, it's such a huge, huge, huge enabler for access, for leveling up, parts of the clinical team, but also non-clinical team in our case. And so, Marina and I, we saw Omri, I think one of the HLTH conferences, I think the prior one to our June one, so last October, November. And kind of a light bulb went off to say this makes sense, right? Because if you think about the whole person care that is lacking and missing, as the patient is going through their journey, right, and tough journeys depending on the disease type, how can we enable that partnership between high tech and high touch? One other quick parameter on the thinking part is that obviously life sciences companies, the patient support programs, there's from a usage perspective, from outcomes perspective, there's room to help there, right? And also, as far as the clinical staff, clinical teams are very hard to scale. There's just never enough clinicians. So how do we look at this non-clinical but very well-trained workforce that is literally trained in behavioral techniques, change techniques, to actually empower those patients going through the challenges they have? That was the genesis of the partnership of how do we combine that high technology and high touch.
So let me elaborate where we are. From a Medisafe perspective, we believe that technology leads the future in how we manage overall healthcare. But we also know that technology is not the only answer. And that is why the Connected Health platform allows for well-integrated communication, so the right information and support and experiences are being delivered at the right time. And so what we loved about building this partnership together with YourCoach is that we could enhance the digital health offerings with health coaching, because we are the platform to provide the connection. That's what we do. From a communications perspective, the app is in place to help manage and enter information and be the foundation for communicating information. So the interventions and support happen at the right time. The platform is what creates the connection. And that platform allows for the right communications and integration. So for those patients who need coaching, and there are so many areas of chronic illness where coaching is so incredibly effective, mentorship is so incredibly effective, we know that we can enhance those offerings and provide more information and support and connection to the communities who use the Medisafe platform. That's where YourCoach comes in, to allow for the right integration of support and coaching at the right time for those patients who are determining that's what they need.
Yeah, and as much as it hurts me to say, not everybody needs a health coach, right? Because that's actually the aspect of that integration between the high tech and high touch, to understand how patients respond. Some are perfectly fine, chatting via the chat. Some want the live connection, over video or voice, right? And that's the beautiful part about understanding what those patients go through and the matching.
I started my career working in neurology and multiple sclerosis, and I'm still extremely active in that area with advocacy and support organizations. And I was just doing some research to help one of our program development teams put together some ideas for some MS support for a program that we're working on. And one of the things I recognized just yesterday is that even in the solutions that I have worked to build over the years, that when these solutions are built in isolation and provide a one-stop solution, I am creating a very difficult system for patients to manage through. Together, Medisafe and YourCoach allows for integrating more of these systems. The ability for a patient to come to one place, to put all of their information into one place, and be able to have the support on the back end ready, willing, and able to come forward when it's needed. And as Eugene said, there are people who don't necessarily need coaches, or at the time right now in their lives, they don't need coaches. However, having those resources available, knowing that the clinical system today does not afford that type of support, they might afford mentorship, in particular in oncology or rare disease. You hear so much about different offices creating their own books of support systems for mentors for patients. But it's so needed at the time when the patient needs it. And that is why YourCoach and Medisafe with this platform allows for that to happen at the right time. And the resources are available for when a person determines it's necessary.
One thing that's really interesting to me here is, at the very beginning when you were describing Medisafe and its journey, you mentioned this sort of point solution problem, which we hear about all the time in digital health, that there's all these great things out there, and if anyone wants to implement them all, it's like a huge headache. And so obviously these sorts of partnerships can help to address that, as well as sort of each individual trying to be as comprehensive with your approach as possible. But I'm curious, like, what when you think about that kind of problem, where you see the end game? It's just more and more consolidation. Obviously, it's always going to be a market, and there's always an aspect of competition.
Lyndi, I'm happy to jump in. I think if we look at healthcare, yes, point solution is one word or two words for it, right? Having said that, everybody talks about ecosystems, right? And really helping patients through their journeys. And so my personal opinion and how we sort of position YourCoach is very much of an ecosystem approach. We all need to do what we do best. However, that interface, right? That entry point, the journey of that patient needs to be as seamless as possible. And so whether we're talking about consolidation as M&A, whether we're talking about an ecosystem approach, we're going to see yes, and yes over time. And again, that's kind of our view. But the most important part here is to keep that patient in mind and their seamless experience going through the journeys they're going through.
I couldn't agree with Eugene more on this. This is about putting that patient first. And we hear all sorts of patient-centric terms, things that we all in the industry say that we're working towards. And this is where action is important. And we know every year, $5 billion invested in patient support by pharmaceutical companies. We know that about 3% of the patient population use that support. And there will always be another one-off solution. There will always be a team or a solution that says we can do it all. That's generally never the case, and one solution can't get you any further. And so integration is important here. Partnership is important here. And in the development of solutions, there have been, at least over this past decade, hundreds of millions of dollars invested in pharma in app development and program development to try to solve this connected issue. How do we learn from? How do we understand behaviors? How do we get the right information at the right time? And with all that investment, we hear people have good success stories or bad ones and say, I don't want to just develop another app. And this is not what we're talking about here. What we do see here is that with all of this investment and all of this time, we're still seeing traditional CRM communications. Maybe someone's using text versus just email, but it's still very static in one way. So what a platform does is connect two-way communication. And what the integration of partnership does, in particular with what we're doing with YourCoach, it allows for even better, more substantive, supportive and personalized interventions and support. You can do this with any of your systems. And this is why partnership is so important, because as we're developing solutions, if we're developing them in isolation, we're creating more complication for patients who are already navigating complicated emotional experiences and journeys. Our role is to make that more seamless, easier, and to have the right resources at the fingertips of patients to be able to help that support. That drives for better outcomes, not to overuse terms. It drives for better satisfaction. It drives for interventions at the right point that allow us to help support patients' needs that might not have to do with just an experience of a treatment, but what they're going through in their life. And it allows patients to have this in one place to be able to have an effective experience and operationalize what their experience is with their doctors and their nurses and their healthcare team. And so I believe, and what we're experiencing here at Medisafe, is partnership becomes the future to expand the resource support system.
maybe I can just add to...
Eugene, you mentioned earlier that...
Go ahead. We have a little bit of delay, which I'm sure...
Go ahead.
Well, I think Lyndi mentioned the part of the clinical team, right? And I wanted to actually just point out, and I think many of the listeners of this podcast come from the life sciences arena, so I think pretty familiar with Medisafe, what Medisafe does around the product itself and the patient journey. I did want to spend maybe literally a minute on what is actually health coaching, right? Kind of step back a little bit because...
Exactly what I was going to ask.
Okay, perfect. See, look at that. Great minds think alike.
And in particular, if I can just add a little to the question.
Yeah.
Like, what is health coaching and what are the specific kind of use cases where it's especially helpful and makes sense in healthcare?
So I'll back up. So first of all, let's talk about just very quickly about the profession. The profession actually has been here for 20 plus years, right? It is rooted in science and behavior change techniques. Again, I won't go on this podcast into the details, but things like motivational and interviewing, coaches are very much equipped with those techniques, okay? So while the profession has been here for 20 plus years, not until the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching, which was set up in 2012, that put in place jobs to be done, accreditations. There's now over 115 schools that have been accredited by the National Board, as an example. And those include undergrad, grad, as well as continuing education schools. We kind of describe this, a health coach as a non-clinical psychotherapist, right? And again, this is a non-clinical service. And the reason I say that the psychotherapist is many of the tools that are used by the coaches are very similar. The difference is, while the therapist goes backward in time, trying to understand some of the root causes, the coaches focus on the future and the goal setting, right? And they're very good in extracting that individual's, intrinsic motivation, because we all do have motivation. It sometimes just needs to be woken up, right? That's a little bit background on the profession itself, right? And health coaching. One other quick thing, and many things has happened since then. American Medical Association, together with the National Board, announced Level 3 test CPT codes. That was back in 2019. And then in early July, the CMS actually published the physician fee schedule for 2024, where guess what? Health and well-being coaching is actually included in there as a pilot. So we'll see if it sticks after all the comments. But of course, our goals are for it to stick. And Medicare, of course, would be one of the key sponsors of this as we go forward. So I'll pause here if Jonah, if you have anything else.
Well, yeah. I mean, let me just follow up on that a little bit, because it's interesting to me that the trends that are pushing health coaching forward right now, right? It feels like, given physician burnout, given, all of the increasing sort of demands on the time of all different kinds of providers, and that this would sort of fill a gap, right? Like that the health coach can step in to provide something for patients that other providers just aren't equipped or aren't available, or aren't trained to provide. I mean, would you say that's kind of accurate, that framing?
So, back a little bit, the short answer is yes, but let me peel this and your question around different use cases. And let's actually, walk through this kind of in the Medisafe scenario, right? Through a patient support program. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole journey, but ultimately, a patient has a care plan. Part of that care plan are the molecules, right, or a prescription. And now I'll use a case, again, a persona, right, that instead of talking about you're not adherent, right, where coaches come in is really understanding what is the goal, right? And if I'm a 63-year-old male, right, just went through, a heart issue, again, I'm just using that as an example, my motivation is not to take a pill. My motivation is to be able to play with my grandkids, right, and be able to catch a ball. And part of that, a short-term goal, becomes taking the pill in order to be able to do that, right, or taking a walk. Coaches do not prescribe. This is not it's a non-prescriptive profession. It's a non-clinical profession. yet they can understand and work together with the clinical staff, whether it's a nurse in the patient support program, right, or even a PI within a clinical trial, to understand what is that care plan and how to help that individual go through their life journey. Again, not focusing on the pill, but focusing on, why do I want to get up tomorrow morning and play with my grandkid again, right? So that's one of the use cases. Lastly, and I'll pause there, if you think about a doctor's office, on average, it's 8 to 10 minutes, right? And there's some shared decision-making that goes on in that doctor's office in very short amount of time. And there is a care plan. Now, as we all know, 99.99% of the time we spend outside of the doctor's office. And coaches have the time to spend with a patient, have the time to understand the goals and motivations of that patient and help them through that. So that's the very clinical use case, but there's many others out there.
I mean, to put it another way, I think the whole idea of adherence as a term has been criticized in recent years for being a bit sort of paternalistic, right? And a bit like, because the healthcare at the end of the day is for the patient. And so their adherence or non-adherence, yeah.
We all want autonomy as human beings, right? And I think that high tech plus high touch allows that for the patients and individuals to at least feel more autonomous, right? Given all the pressures around us.
And I think it's a really important point, Jonah, that this idea as, adherence is kind of has this bad stigma to it in the way that we look at it when, or at least viewed that way in recent years, when really the idea of helping to keep people on track to get to the end result or end goals that they've decided on that they want to reach along with their healthcare team is most important. And if I can go back to a bit of the foundation of Medisafe, as we're looking at the challenges we're looking to solve and what we have built and technically and what we've established with programs, this is really based on filling these gaps, right? Decreasing the number of gaps between the patient who's going through this journey from start to finish, right? Everything that they're needing to live through, from diagnosis to management to ongoing, living their lives, as Eugene said, playing ball with their grandkids, walking their daughter down the aisle, whatever those things are that they're focusing in on. This is why we're doing everything we can do to keep people healthy and focused and moving forward. But there are gaps. There are gaps in the information that the physician receives that can actually be actionable. There's gaps in information that's delivered between patient and pharmaceutical company about treatments or management of treatments. And all of this was kind of put into this adherence ball, right? Like, let's throw it all into this, and that this is all self-serving to drive, more revenue. Okay, does adherence drive more revenue? Sure. Does it also drive better health outcomes? For most, maybe not for all, but understanding what's happening through this journey, being able to connect the experience allows the better choices to happen. So the adherence to better healthcare actually happens. And what we have created with the Connected Health platform is a system that for those who are interested in how it works behind the scenes, it's a no-code, very flexible system that allows for the systems and programs to be connected. But for the patient to go into a system like a digital companion, to be able to put in their medications and their schedules and their experience, and to be able to provide content and interventions and support, as I said, at the right time, that allows for this better long-term experience and satisfaction and the right changes to healthcare and treatment regimen, health and eating regimen, fitness, emotional regimen at the right time. And that's what we're talking about here. So I'm going to put a vote in for adherence as being a positive word for better adherence for your overall healthcare management.
You got to where I was going next, and we are coming to the end of our time. So one more and then closing thoughts, I think. But we've talked a lot about the high touch aspect, and I'd love to talk a little bit about the tech side. What does it take to make this work? What tech innovations are underpinning it, and buzzwords like AI, that people are very interested in these days. What's under the hood?
So Eugene, you want to go and then I'll go?
Yeah, sure. So we, while we're ultimately a health coaching service, we also very early on realized that, integration of those services need to be very easy. So some of the things that we do, we ship a number of APIs and widgets that at a technology level is easy to integrate between the two partners or three partners or ecosystem partners. In general. So that's kind of the tech part. Now, while we talk about high touch at YourCoach, we're huge believers in high tech, right? So as a matter of fact, some of the things that we filed a number of patents on leveling up coaches, while, to your point, Jonah, learning models and GPT has been hot since ChatGPT, started scaling. Some of the patents that we filed in leveling up coaches dates, a couple of years back. And again, we still believe that for foreseeable future, human eye is better than AI because, part of that is what I alluded to earlier. We all want to feel accountable. And again, personal, I speak for myself. I don't know if I can be accountable to a chatbot, but maybe there are people that are. But also it gives me that autonomy to be able to talk through with someone. Now, again, we do believe in augmenting coaches and helping them through, right? And so that's where we're heavily leveraging the technology to help coaches have the best relationships they can have with the end clients.
So we believe that on the front end, technology needs to be easy. It needs to be easy to integrate on the back end, easy to use on the front end. And so we have a system that uses machine learning. We have a system that is AI assisted, right, as we're looking forward to what the future of technology is. We've created a platform that's no coded so that from a customer perspective, going in and making changes can happen in as simple as short as it takes to have changes in information reviewed, approved, and implemented from the pharmaceutical side. What we do for patients is to create a system that is super low touch, right? Very simple once the information is put into the system. And in most cases, in our sponsored programs, when you are invited into the program, you don't even have to download all the upfront information. It's done through the APIs, through the communications with the programs that we're working with in pharma, so that the connection to providers, hub nurses, caregivers, the coaches, all of that information is put in on a platform. The scheduling of that is done literally with one touch. Changing of that is very simple. We even use pictures to describe pills so that if someone doesn't understand specifically their dosing, they can say, it is that little pink pill that I'm taking. So we try to create a very seamless environment for not just for our patients, but for our customers to make sure that our systems align really well. I mentioned earlier that we work along with Salesforce so that we can integrate into these systems or proprietary systems within pharma and make that back end very simple. And we work with the IT teams and the security teams up front to make sure that that is not a high heavy lift for anybody across the board.
Awesome. Well, I want to give a chance for both of you to give some kind of closing thoughts, wrap up thoughts. Takeaways that you'd like people who listen to the podcast to have about, the lessons you learned from this partnership and what you think it represents.
Want me to go first, Eugene, and then you can wrap up?
Yeah, I'm easy.
So here at Medisafe, we absolutely believe that technology is our future with a really, really strong balance to that high touch environment. We want to ensure that we are integrating and personalizing and creating holistic approach system where behavioral interventions happen at the right time with the right people. And what that does from a business perspective is it makes cost and time a lot more effective. We have interventions and support by human support at the right time, not every time. And the communications that are not humanly driven are right because it's based on the experience that the patient is having right now in their journey. We're committed to bringing those resources forward and very excited about working with the partner YourCoach as a strong partner of ours to ensure that we are providing the right resources to continue to grow our patient support network in partnership to ensure that every program that we bring forward offers resources to enrich and help drive better patient experience as people are living with chronic illnesses.
I'm just going to echo about the excitement about the partnership, right? And while, the press release is behind us, a lot more learnings are ahead, right? So looking forward to learning with the Medisafe team and the many patients that are out there that need the help. If I had to leave another message here is that, health coaching is here. Health coaching is here to stay. While it is a non-clinical profession, there's many clinical studies out there, and we've been publishing deep dives every 2 weeks around a particular therapeutic area. So everything from heart health, we just recently published around mental health and adolescence, oncology, and if you look at the trajectory of the clinical trials and studies that are out there, in the last 4 years, been just skyrocketing on the number of studies, leveraging health coaches as this great army of pretty well trained behavior change agents. On that, I will end.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. It's been really interesting, and I'm glad we did this way and got to sort of really dive deep into this partnership news.
Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much.
That concludes this episode of the pharmaphorum podcast. You can find more information about this episode, including a download link and information about other installments in the series at pharmaphorum.com/podcast. The pharmaphorum podcast is also available on iTunes, Spotify, Acast, Stitcher, and Podme, where you can find and subscribe by searching for pharmaphorum. And don't forget to visit our website, where you can sign up for daily news and analysis bulletins, and to follow us on Twitter at pharmaphorum. Thanks for listening.